hear you.
I mean, it's probably not the end of the world if we don't get somebody to take notes because we have a recording. But I'd rather rather have somebody to take minutes.
I agree with you there. Doing a quick scan to make sure that everybody. So that was my next question was, and actually that's a question for you, Eric. Do we do blue sheets for the virtual interims?
We do. We do indeed.
So then yes, Spencer, we are going to do blue sheets in the Etherpad. Somebody who's got the pad URL in their cut buffer needs to share it again because people who've joined since don't have it.
Yeah, hold on, give me a second. Oh yeah, Spencer just sent it out. So
Spencer just sent out a different one than Eric sent out.
hey, you're right.
I don't understand why. Just the one coming from data tracker.
Well,
oh, there is one in the data tracker. Okay, I was looking for one and didn't see one. All right. Well, let's take one or the other and put a redirect.
Take the one out of the data tracker.
So I'm going to move everything over.
So
fortunately, somebody's been busy in the other one. I think Eric's been busy in the other one, so.
I think that link probably works good for you.
I suggest to use the one without any TCP port. That's easier for the firewall. And typically using the port 9009 caused problems in previous interims. So let's stick to the one I pasted, simply because it's plain HTTPS.
So there we go. So now that we've muddled our way through this,
I can take notes if you want.
that would be delightful. Awesome. Please do in the Etherpad. Now that everybody has gone to the Etherpad to sign in, we know that everybody can find the Etherpad and can help with the notes. At the very least, keep an eye on it and make sure that anything you say that you say is represented properly and otherwise help with clarification. All right, with that, I'm Leslie Daigle, co-chair of the MOPS working group. Kyle?
I'm Kyle Rose, co-chair of the MOPS working group.
So thanks everybody for coming to our virtual interim. Sorry that we were not able to get together in person in Vancouver, but I'm sorry about a lot of things these days. For those of you who may or may not be familiar with how we do interims, there is a Jabber channel. It's on that I know is posted on our starter page, and there is an Etherpad, as Eric has shared with us, which is where the notes are being written in real time. Feel free to jump in and help with those, and please do sign in, sharing your name and affiliation so that we'll have a record of who was actually at this meeting for future planning purposes.
I'll monitor the Jabber channel as well as the queue in the chat. So a little bit of logistics here. If you want to get in the queue to speak, just basically in the chat type +Q to add yourself or -Q to remove yourself. And if you're not speaking, please keep your mic muted so we can reduce background noise.
Great, thank you. And I think you need to make me a presenter in order to be able to.
Just can I ask it?
See if I can figure that out.
Go ahead. He was asking a question.
Sorry, who was just speaking?
Somebody was asking a question and then didn't get a chance to ask it.
Yeah, sorry. I was asking, where would you like the notes written? Do you want me to write them?
The Etherpad.
Okay.
That's all right, because it just then people can see it in real time and help if there's any clarification.
Okay, sure.
Yes. Kyle, you were going to make
You
me a
should be
presenter
presenter
something.
now.
Okay. Scroll through my many applications and pick the one I want to share and not accidentally share. Unfortunate. All right. So if I've done this correctly, you should be seeing a version of the agenda on screen. Pauses for effect.
We're there.
We can see it.
Okay, good. Thank you. Just so unless there's any bashes to the agenda, and I'll pause for substance.
Hey, Leslie, this is Sanjay. Just a quick question on folks that are in the meeting and have a question. How do you want to handle that?
That's what.
Yeah, do you want folks to use the chat?
Yeah, use the chat, and as Kyle was saying, use +Q to get in the queue and -Q to get out of it.
Got it. Sorry, I must have missed that.
And if there's anyone for whom that doesn't work, speak up and we'll figure out something else. Okay, moving right along then. Jake, you are up. And if I do this is good?
Leslie and Kyle, do you have the note well to show? It's mandatory. Sorry. I'm the bookkeeper here.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And a good.
If you Google for it, it'll show up somewhere.
Sharing briefly so that I can actually find the note well. About that and we'll fluff.
It is disturbing not to have the usual settings. That's okay.
We're still working out the kinks in our processes. It's we'll get there.
All right. Back. Share. Thanks for catching that, Kirk. So this is an IETF meeting. So IETF policies are in effect. So for various topics such as patents or code of conduct. So I'm sure you're all reading this on the screen as we're sitting here. But just by way of reminder that you agree to follow IETF processes and policies. And if you are aware that any IETF contribution is covered by patents or patent applications that are owned or controlled by you or your sponsor, you must disclose that fact or not participate in the discussion. Yeah, and as a participant or in or attendee to any IETF activity, you acknowledge that written, audio, video, and photographic records of meetings may be made public, that your personal information provided to the IETF will be handled in accordance with the IETF privacy statement, and that you agree to work respectfully with other participants, with a pointer to the ombuds team should you have need of it. I think that's a fair representation of the note well. Eric, if that scratches the itch. Move on to Jake.
Great, thank you for taking that. I think we have a Glendine in the queue, according to the chat.
Kyle, it's up to you.
Took himself out. Perfect. Okay.
Wait a minute. No, Glenn removed himself from the queue.
Okay. We could go to, yeah, all right. I don't get to forward these, right? I just ask for next one.
I think that's right.
All right. So I'm Jake Holland. I'm presenting about the current working group draft that we have and the updates since our last meeting. Next slide, please. So there's been a few changes in kind of draft status and things around the draft. And to summarize these, the draft was adopted as a working group draft on the mailing list. We renamed it. Two co-authors joined, Spencer and Ollie. I'm very grateful to them. I think they're really going to get us over the hump into a definitely useful document. And I am very pleased with their contributions and glad to have them on board. We added an acknowledgement section and made a try at capturing all the comments from the mic last time. And from, I think it already had the comments I recall from any email discussion. So if you've made a contribution and you don't, and I haven't, and I've missed you, then please be sure to let me know. I think we're caught up on the list of acknowledgements so far that have been incorporated into the document at its current draft. We added a, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Kyle, are you typing? Somebody's typing in there. Not muted.
No, but I will. I'll mute whoever's typing.
Sorry. Go ahead, Jake.
For basically reviewers and potential contributors to kind of give them pointers to the right places to engage. And we got the repo moved to a working group owned repository. So thanks to the chairs for getting that set up. This is its current location. So go there if you're looking for it, or for the working document of it. And there's a pointer to that in the draft also. Next slide, please. So there's a few bits of content that the draft will be about itself that also we've gotten started with, mostly my co-authors, thanks to them. And just a few, helpful additions getting us in the right direction on what the document text should end up talking about. Next slide, please. We have a list of issues. So these are mostly in the issue tracker. I think there might be one or two in TBDs in the text of the draft still. And where I want to spend most of my time on this update is that there's a great suggestion from Spencer, I thought. And please do take a look at the issues list, add issues. I think we had one contribution already from, what was it? I think it was Matt. And that's much appreciated. We'll be taking a look at that and incorporating it. But Spencer had a great idea, and so I'll talk about the very next thing that we're probably going to rev the draft for and put something out, and that is the template on the next slide here. That's the feedback that we're specifically soliciting in addition to any sort of issues you want to raise. So go ahead to the next slide, please. So we're going to add a section to the draft, we're thinking, and it's going to look something like this. And we're looking for feedback on this part plus contributions from those of you who are interested enough in media operations that you're attending this meeting, plus any friends you might have. So the idea is that we would like to collect a catalog of the issues that people know about in the community. Things you've encountered before, things that obviously we'll be filling out a few of these from our own experience, but we think we can reach a broader audience. or we think that there's things that we don't know about, probably, that other people who are taking a look at this do know about, that we can probably incorporate. We're asking for a name, a reference to something describing the issue, even like a pointer to a mailing list comment about it, if that's the best place where it got explained. Like, that is really helpful for just kind of understanding the background. A description of what the issue is about and its impact, where it happens in the network, who can see it happening, and just some idea of how much we know about its prevalence, any incidents that you might know about. We're also asking for a list of the mitigation techniques. So now the mitigation techniques I want to go over a little bit as well, because it's possibly out of scope for the current motivation section described by the current draft. So there's a few different things that we might be doing with these mitigation techniques, and it kind of depends what the contributions end up looking like. But one possibility would be to collect them into a section that's about mitigations and kind of expand the scope of the draft. Another would be to turn it into another document. So we want to make sure that we have a list of these that we're maintaining. It might be in the mitigations for now, and then in a mitigation section in the draft for now, and then move to a separate document a little bit later when we're kind of ready to make a division. But the idea here is that we want to right now the document is supposed to be collecting mostly informational things to be aware of, but we would like also to consider how best to present the best known ways to address them, and to turn it into perhaps a BCP that makes actual recommendations, or perhaps an informational document that just sort of lays out the things that people have brought up in a way that can be sort of easily consumed by people who might benefit from knowing these things. So that is the template that we're asking for. And yeah, sorry, I suddenly am getting a bunch of messages. I'm not sure if you hear my dinging going off. Yeah, so that's it. And any comments or questions?
All right, Matt, unmute yourself and go ahead.
Let's see if this works. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, perfect. So thanks. I actually think that the template, I think it's a good idea with a document like this. It's, it can end up being an encyclopedia, right? So my first reaction is, if we're targeting this towards people who understand the video domain, but perhaps don't understand the network domain as well, and it's intended to be a survey, I would think talking about the challenges, but then referencing, especially when you start getting into mitigation techniques in detail, referencing other documents or best practices in other places is probably best, because otherwise this could get both out of hand and stale very quickly. So that I guess that's my reaction to the comment. But I do like the way that this template is trying to shore that up a bit.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Another thing I probably should have mentioned. One of the possibilities here is to, if we collect the mitigation techniques, to turn them into, perhaps, if there's enough of it, if it turns into really a large encyclopedia, then maybe it would be multiple separate documents that could be BCPs directed toward different audiences. We think that's a pretty good way to collect it. So that's one of the ideas on the table. I think that, it kind of depends what the contributions end up looking like, but yeah, that's the direction we're thinking of. And thank you for that feedback. We'll certainly take a good look at it, try to incorporate it. Spencer, thank you.
Spencer, go ahead.
And traditionally, I would unmute before I started talking, right? What we were thinking there early on was basically just to say we're doing more than just to say, you know, this is a list of bad things that can happen. So it was important to me to have the stuff that we were collecting be actionable at some level. Even if to say, you know, it's like, I mean, like a couple of things we've got in there already. It's like, well, that's the way TCP works. You know, so, you know, you even be able to give people an answer saying, if this is what you're seeing, you know, there may not be a really great mitigation right now. But it was important to me for these things to be as actionable as we could make them. And so that's kind of why I was starting to talk about collecting the mitigations there. And I think that the suggestion to collect pointers is a really good one because you use the word encyclopedic, and I think that's exactly the right thing that I was afraid of, which was basically, here's a list of sad tales from the video streaming community, and not really actionable or anything like that. So I think that's definitely a good suggestion, and we didn't want to emphasize this is the proposed template. So we are happy to listen to people explain to us what we could be doing better as well. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good, thanks, Spencer. And you know, I'd like to mention that even if the answer is like, well, that's the way TCP works, so we don't have another solution right now, you know, maybe that's nonetheless a good hint that, well, you could consider going and looking at Quick, or maybe, you know, next year we could consider looking at SRT, depending what you're doing. Like if TCP is the problem, that points in the direction of useful solutions, right? So knowing that is half the battle. Yeah.
All right, the chair recognizes Glenn.
Yeah, hey, so I wanted to follow up on the comment Spencer just made. I think that collecting mitigations is really good. So you know, +1 on the doing that. Although I don't think we should cast them as sort of like, well, here's a mitigation and problem solved. You know, sort of just like as Jay commented. I think maybe where there's issues, we get called out and we sort of can say, so we can say, well, here's a mitigation that sort of starts alleviating the problem. However, there may be better solutions and bigger solutions that are necessary. And maybe, you know, this is sort of a farming exercise as well, to collect requirements that could get turned into problem statements and future documents within both MOPS and beyond beyond MOPS in the IETF. In particular, you know, if it's things like, well, that's just how TCP works, that's a really good indicator that maybe there's something we need to revisit architecturally someplace else. Maybe it's, you know, like Jake said, maybe it's look at Quick, SRT, maybe it's a need for something new that isn't around today. You know, because everything to do with video, you know, happens to the internet at scale. So one little bad thing, maybe locally, kind of escalates very quickly into being a very bad thing across the board for a lot of people. So my 2 cents.
All right, Matt.
Yeah, just a follow-up. I think that the other thing that I'm thinking about when we're talking about mitigations is that it makes it, and maybe this is kind of along the lines of what Glenn was saying, is that it's not really black and white, because often, and I think everybody will resonate with this, it's actually what are the trade-offs and what are you finding acceptable. And so the reason I'm thinking about this is, as the section that I kind of put in as something that might be worth putting in the document is about personalization and advertising and how that impacts things like cacheability and network utilization and all of those other things. And it's more of a, hey, video person, the choices that you make have these downstream effects, and you should be aware of them. It's not that, oh, personalization or advertising is bad or shouldn't happen or whatever. That's not my judgment, but it's that if they're aware of it, then they can make better decisions about how it impacts the infrastructure, what resources they might need, and so on. So I think that having that kind of veneer in the document that gives them the tools to dig in, use the right nomenclature to potentially find the solution that fits their need is kind of where I'm going. But I like the idea of having, some of the options listed. The pointer comment was really just, we're probably going to have to be a little judicious to make sure that we, it doesn't turn into too much of a book. But I don't want to give the impression that we shouldn't have answers in here if we can put them.
So I'm conscious of the time. Thanks for that input, Matt. I'm conscious of the time, and I think that we should probably move on unless there are other issues here. What I would suggest is, why don't we try collecting some issues and see what we get, and then we can figure out how big a problem or a smaller problem we actually have.
Works for me. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Matt, Spencer, Glenn. Maybe I'll send a quick follow-up to the list. I thought I heard one suggestion in there that might result in a template change. Like maybe we should ask about trade-offs or something. But yeah, that was between Glenn and Matt. We'll think about that a little bit and move on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both for that.
Thank you. All right, so next up we have my cat who wants to come and say hello, but I'll mute shortly. And Sanjay, you're up as soon as I get the slides going.
All right. All right, looks like I'm good to go here. I see the slides up there. My name is Sanjay Mishra, and I'm from Verizon, but at the moment speaking with the Streaming Video Alliance head on. And of course, Verizon is a member company. This presentation is a little bit outside of some of the things that I've spoken in the past. In the prior MOPS meeting, focus has been on one of the working groups, the open caching working group, and how that ties back into the CDNI working group both ways. Something that got picked up from there and something that got added to the working group. But I thought maybe to try and broaden the conversation, because sticking with open caching working group leaves a lot of conversation out on what are the important work that is going on in the Alliance. So I actually had reached out to Jason Thibault from Streaming Video Alliance, and he graciously offered his help to share the great work that is going on within the Alliance. So I'm going to be talking through some of that here. Slide 2, please. Just as a quick recap, and I apologize for those that are already familiar with it, but just wanted to give a quick view here. So SVA is really, it's a collaborative ecosystem comprising of content publishers, content distributors, and the network service providers and technology vendors to work on over-the-top streaming media delivery. And within SVA, member companies share a common vision of making streaming media provide a consistent experience to an end user from glass to glass. This minimally needs understanding of issues around content creation, packaging, underlying media protocols and transport protocols, network behavior, and the end user player. So lots of different pieces that actually go into this. So there's points of interest in each of these areas. And as an outcome, for the most part, Alliance will produce guidelines and best practices. But also at times the Alliance would run the trials and write specifications and conduct interoperability testing. So of course there's heavy reliance on IETF for the protocols and interoperability, but there's also an opportunity to bring back to the IETF some of the work that we do and some other things that we think would benefit IETF. Please move to slide 3. So I just wanted to take a quick moment here to highlight a few things before we get into some of the specific projects within the SCA. So the recent months have had a profound impact globally, but then as with any challenge, there also is an opportunity, and there surely is a COVID-19 effect globally, where we all have learned to live in a virtual world, including this meeting here, which unfortunately is not in person. And obviously there are some tidbits of relevancy also from the streaming media point of view. What COVID-19 has brought upon us is a pretty heavy usage of the network in many different areas, even including the voice calls. But leaving those aside, from our purposes here, some of the numbers just to kind of share. Comcast has reported a video surge in their network somewhere about 38%, and a peak traffic of about 32%. AT&T reported something similar with 28% jump in core network traffic, and that the video traffic was about half of the traffic on their mobile network, pretty significant. And also, not to be left out, Verizon reported similar numbers where their video traffic was up by 36%. And also, AT&T, like AT&T, they also have reported surge in social media platforms as well. So from what is relevant above is that streaming video is already a significant part of the network traffic, but on top, events such as COVID-19 cast a big effect on the network capacity. So while network providers do plan for spikes and scale their networks, but the higher order point here is that really no one entity in the OTT video delivery food chain of its own can deliver or be as effective when solving for issues such as scaling and latency. So really the question is there room for improvement? Next slide, please. Yes, there is room for improvement. For example, just to highlight some of the work that is ongoing in other working groups, the live streaming working group and also virtual reality study group, there are a few initiatives that are looking into the opportunities to measure latency and see where that can be improved. So one of the projects, so of the 3 that are listed here, the first one is best practices document, basically for looking at the latency glass to glass from the encoder to screen. This project is holistically looking at the end-to-end workflow, examining points of weaknesses right from the distribution encoder to the encoders and down through the whole video delivery chain, looking at where there's opportunity to tweak and tune. So that is, and the outcome would really be a best practices document from that effort. The other on the VR study group, basically member companies are looking to run some live VOD, live and VOD traffic for VR 360 content on the live network, and then measure end-to-end performance. So, and the VR study group is also working with the VR industry forum to jointly run these tests and then publish results. And then the third one is the initiative very similar to VR study group, which will focus on collecting measurements and along with the workflow, identifying the points that needs to be tweaked or have been tweaked, and then publish best practices and the results. So there's potentially a possibility that some of that work may result into identifying areas that might need some help in IETF. So there might be some internet draft that may eventually come through that studies. Next slide, please. Okay, so wanted to give a little bit of a view on some of the potential work that is also being considered within the Alliance. There's much more definition that has to be done in terms of the specificity that needs to be looked at, but broadly, some of the work includes something that, one is TCP stack optimization. I know this is something that is very keenly done in IETF already, but the intent is to look at, again, to the TCP stack and look at what might be the opportunities here for some tweaks, again, looking at the video delivery and seeing where might be some of the pain points. So this work will obviously require some close coordination eventually with IETF as well, if there are areas that seems like worth looking at. And then, as we have seen with the COVID-19, scalability is a major consideration. And what also is needed is basically how about smartly using the existing network resources as opposed to throwing more money infinitely into just growing the network. You can only go so much. So I think the important part is to how do you smartly use the existing network resources. And then another project that's being closely looked at is content pre-positioning for in-home storage. Traditionally, the set-top boxes have played a big role, and they already act as a smart hub for recording broadcast TV primarily, and of course the TV guide, etc. But there's a lot of room here for storage, and potentially any content that can be offloaded and being kept close to the devices, and even pre-positioning of the content closer to the devices, closer to the end user, has some opportunities. So there are member companies that are interested in pursuing in-home storage as one of the potential working group items. Next slide, please. So this one talks about some potential new working groups as well. So one of the activities that the Open Caching Working Group has done as relying heavily on CDNI, some of the work has been done, but in addition, the Alliance is also looking at additional work around the CDN interoperability. So more has to be defined here, but primarily some of the work that has already been done in CDNI, but really not implemented. So there are some feedback that members are interested in bringing back. So as that work really gets defined, CDNI interoperability is one area that the work is going to be looked at within this work group. The other item is also challenges that are across the myriad of video players that you have on the end user devices. The issue is that all video players don't behave the same way. So sometimes they necessarily don't have a stickiness to the redirected source. So this then causes the inconsistency in the video player experience. So potentially there's some opportunity to look at what can be done to sort of improve and have best practices around video players that can support different OSs, different devices that have a uniform experience. So those are at least 2 working groups that are being considered to be established in coming weeks and months, probably. With that said, I think this is probably the last slide that I have. Right, Leslie? I think this is the last one. Yeah. So this is the last slide. With that said, thanks very much. And Leslie, back to you and for any questions.
Anyone? One? Any questions for Sanjay?
Yeah, hi, Leslie. There's a couple of us in the queue.
Kyle? All right, I'm not hearing Kyle. I am not entirely sure. All right, Glenn, I think you're first.
So we have Glenn, Jake, and Spencer right now in the queue, by the way. So the other thing I'd like to add to Sanjay's great presentation is that I think this sort of got dropped through the cracks at the SVA when Sanjay and JT were making up the slides. There's also work that has started up very recently within the network and transfer group of the SVA that has started to look at use cases around both edge computing as well as multicast use cases in somewhat in non-traditional areas of multicast usage. This would be beyond a lot of people have looked at things like delivering to the client via multicast or cache population via multicast. So what I anticipate we might be able to also add in, what Sanjay talked about, is a down the road to do a crossover where we bring forward some media use cases for multicast streaming to the IETF. And I think this would fold nicely with the other work Jake has done on the multicast stuff.
Glenn?
Yes.
Did we lose you, Glenn?
That was Glenn. I thought he finished.
That was done.
Sorry, it didn't sound like it.
It's hard for people to walk away from the microphone when there's no microphone.
Well, thanks, Sanjay, and thanks also, Glenn. That's an interesting addition to Sanjay's update. I thought this looked like really interesting work. I wanted to ask a little bit about how what does that engagement look like, do you think? Will this be like SVA members commenting on the IETF mailing lists in the sort of best fit they can find, where you want to have the tight engagement with IETF? Because I know that at least with regards to a few folks, there's the differences in PR considerations between the SVA and the IETF contributions was part of the reason that that there's not like 100% overlap in the membership. So yeah, I guess that's most of what I wanted to ask, and I'll have to think about the multicast insight. I'll be very interested to hear more about that too.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Jake. So what I think, especially with multicast, is something that I know SBA is looking at, and something that work is being also done here. What as individuals, what we can do is bring back the updates into the IETF, and more importantly, not only just the updates. There's going to be questions and things which IETF is has either looked at or would be interested in looking at. So we can always bring the problem statement, and in fact bring it back to this very working group, that this is a specific problem which is really well and beyond the scope of something that can be resolved in SBA, but that's something that maybe IETF can look at. So I think the important part is for us from the SBA standpoint, define a very clear problem, do some research, and then bring the appropriate problem statement and any references that can point to what work has been done. And if there were something that was missing, then kind of try to spell that out, that here's the problem statement, here's what I think has been done, but looks like there's some room for improvements. So if we can bring that type of messaging back into the IETF, I think then there's clearly a room for where IETF can really look at it and work, and SBA can consume what comes out of the IETF in terms of companies adopting the implementation or adopting the draft.
Great, thank you.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes,
Very
but you're
faintly.
faint. Yeah, it's like maybe you've your computer onboard mic as opposed to your outboard mic.
Let me figure this out. Can you just handle this for a few minutes, Leslie?
Spencer, was it?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Sanjay for the update on the COVID-19 effect on. That's something that the author team on the streaming considerations draft had been talking about, wanting to add that pointers to that for the section on unpredictable traffic patterns. And like I say, we really appreciate the update on that. Thank you.
Thanks. I was wondering the same thing when I was going through the slides. Glenn, you're next.
Hi. So hey, switch to a different mic. Maybe this will work better, so you can see me when I walk away. Hey, I wanted to address the concern Jake had over potential IP conflicts between the two groups. So I think when the documents get done over the SVA, the tradition there is to publish them onto the web for anybody to read without signing any required IPR agreements. The IPR over there really pertains to members of the alliance who potentially would, adopt or implement things that in standards the alliance would produce. But things like use cases, other stuff like that, even best practices get published onto the internet, and that way, when they're done, the IETF membership can just take a look at them, and we can use them over here in MOPS without any concern. So I think we're good to go on that regard. And if we have a problem, somebody should see me, because I'll do what I can to fix it. I'm on the board over there.
Thank you.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Well,
Sorry.
we can hear you well.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Anyone else? Any further questions for Sanjay? If not, I guess we'll move on to the next talk.
Thank you. And so next up, something completely different. We have the secure routing transport, SRT. So Max Sharbaiko, if you take the floor, I will share your slides.
Thank you.
Try to share your slides.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for offering this time slot. My name is Maxim Shurabayko. I'm senior software developer at Haivision. Together with SK Telecom, we've prepared and submitted the draft specific SRT protocol recently. I did a presentation of SRT at the dispatch session to discuss how SRT can fit into IETF workflows. And today I would like to do an overview of the protocol features that could potentially be useful for MOPS use cases. Next slide, please. So what is SRT? SRT stands for Secure Reliable Transport. It is a protocol built on top of UDP. It is content agnostic. It provides bidirectional data transmission with automatic repeat requests, forward error correction, and bonded connections. It also supports stream multiplexing, so several connections can be established over a single UDP socket. Next slide, please. SRT offers several operation modes: message mode, live mode, and buffer mode. Message mode can be used to transmit messages that span over several packets. Live mode is a subset of message mode with additional features to enable real-time live stream delivery. The third mode is called the buffer mode. It is used to open a connection, transmit a single and large piece of data, then close the connection. Next slide. So with the described operation modes, SRT can cover a number of use cases. This slide presents a list of cases when SRT can be used. The major use case of SRT is live video contribution and distribution. SRT offers mechanisms of latency management, packet retransmission, and so on. And it is content agnostic, so usually SRT transmits MPEG-TS, RTP, or elementary streams in its payload. Another use case is transferring files and segmented streaming formats like HLS and DASH. In this case, SRT ensures every packet is delivered to the receiver as efficient as possible. And SRT doesn't control the end-to-end latency because real-time delivery is not required in this case. The third potential use case of SRT is tunneling. Again, SRT is agnostic to the content. It transmits and therefore it can tunnel TCP packets, HTTP requests and responses, and almost any other type of payloads. Message exchange is one more use case, exchanging some metadata, control data, custom voice commands, and so on. Next slide. So as I've already mentioned, the major purpose of SRT is low latency live video contribution and distribution in live operation modes. In this mode, SRT provides a constant end-to-end latency that includes network transmission latency and a configurable buffering delay of the receiver. The buffering delay is used to retransmit lost packets. Those packets that failed to be recovered within the given latency are dropped in favor of following packets to enable real-time live streaming. Next slide. Before going deeper into the overview of SRT features, I would like to share some motivation why one should consider using SRT. SRT was created and first used in 2013. In 2017, SRT was made open source and free for public usage. At the moment, SRT is one of the most widely used protocols for live contribution and distribution. Last year, SRT received the Technical Emmy Award. Companies using SRT are joining the SRT Alliance that currently counts more than 350 members, and only last year more than 100 new companies had joined the SRT Alliance. This slide presents the latest survey on the video transport protocol's usage conducted recently by Haivision. It can be seen that SRT holds a decent part. As the amount of live video distributed over the public network increases, the relevance and application of SRT has grown enormously. Still, without any doubt, there are alternative protocols and solutions that can be used as well, each having its advantages and disadvantages. Therefore, I would like to go through SRT features to highlight what is available in SRT out of the box and what is not available. Next slide, please. This slide presents a matrix of SRT features that address the most common tasks and issues associated with live streaming. The first set of tasks is connectivity. Connecting two peers together to exchange data without using a third party is often very tricky. Modern-day networks use NAT and firewalls. While SRT offers a firewall traversal mechanism, it lacks NAT traversal. We are interested in integrating it with interactive connectivity establishment if it makes sense. Connection migration and network switching are features that also could potentially be added in the future. To distinguish multiplex streams, SRT already operates with connection IDs, which could be used to perform these kinds of switching. Next set of tasks is access control. Consider a client who wants to connect to a streaming server and request a certain resource. The streaming server needs to authenticate the clients, probably share the stream definition of the requested resource, and start sending the data. SRT currently supports this use case, except for the stream definition functionality, which is more or less available, but not yet fully defined. Our current vision is to use the stream definition protocol for this purpose. The next thing is security. Once a connection is established, content can be transmitted over a public network so that anyone can access it. SRT offers IS encryption of the payload of data packets. A pre-shared password is used with a password-based key derivation mechanism to establish an encrypted connection. Other automated key distribution methods could potentially be adopted in the future. The fourth threat is content delivery. Like any lossy network, the public internet suffers from packet losses, packet reordering, jitter, and a varying end-to-end latency. Packet losses introduce artifacts in the video. The varying end-to-end latency may cause unstable playback speed, freezes, and so on. Some lost packets may not be retransmitted in time. They have to be dropped to enable real-time streaming. All of this has a major impact on the quality of experience. SRT addresses these problems. Also, SRT is trying to do congestion control, flow control, and be network friendly. Live streaming does not permit many options here because of the defined input rates. But an SRT center can make decisions to drop packets if it thinks the network is congested, thus at least not causing more cross-traffic congestion. But there is much room for improvement here. The final point of interest is utilizing several networks, for example, to duplicate all the data and improve delivery, or to balance the load between the available links and increase the throughput, or handle periods of congestion on certain links. So this set of features is a work in progress. Starting functionality will be added in the upcoming release of SRT. So next slide, please. And that was an overview of what SRT can offer. Thank you for attention and feel free to ask questions. I will be glad to answer.
Any questions?
I think there was already a discussion about this proposal on dispatch, and you got feedback from Eric Rescola and other people involved in security, Quick, and other protocol. Can you sum up what the status of those discussions are?
So based on this discussion, we decided that SRT should start with an informational track to submit what we already have and to have a solid specification of it. And based on this specification, we can move on and understand in which groups it can be used, in which groups it can be useful for application.
I kind of remember some pushback from the security expert on the security aspect, and from a lot of people that would have to vet on proposal.
I'm not sure who's not following the queue.
I'm sorry. So my name is Alex. I'm part of different groups, and I was following that discussion on dispatch, and I saw the people that are involved in the quick discussion and the RCRP, and proposing that this would be more discussed in the media transport group than a MOPS. But I didn't follow recently, so since I don't see a slide to see what the feedback of IETF was already, I wanted to see what the situation was.
Okay, so why don't we take that a little later in the queue? Because for right now, I think we're focused on the fact that we in the SRT presentation, and in part because we're still trying to hash out what are the media implications and things that we should learn from the SRT experience for media handling in general. So like I said, can we take that a little bit later, and back to you, Kyle, for managing the queue?
Yeah, that sounds good. Jake, I think you're up next.
Can I have, sorry, a quick note on that? Leslie, could you please open the previous slides? So security is one of the points that SRT offers. Sorry.
I get that, and we'll get to discussing it, but for right now, we're...
Yeah, thanks. Okay.
Jake?
Great. So I also am going to be interested in that discussion, but I'll wait on that for now. What I was going to say was, first of all, thank you for bringing this to the IETF. I think it's very interesting. I look at it as possibly an exciting opportunity to never have to learn RTP. And I have a ton of questions about the protocol and its operational behavior, especially as used by apps and senders. But the one question I wanted to address first is, do you view this as something that would, I think you said that right now it's used for ingest and distribution. Do you see this as being extended to deliver content to end users as well at some stage? And if so, kind of what's the I don't know, roadmap for getting there?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So right now, SRT already supports it. Just the major use case of it is live stream, because there was an obvious need for some protocol that would address these issues. So I would say that SRT is very optimized for live streaming, and it can be used for message exchange, user content delivery, and so on. Just maybe some further improvements are required to, for example, improve congestion control for file transfer and so on.
Sorry.
So would that be, so does that include live streaming to end users, or because the use of the pre-shared key, I agree, is going to be problematic if you're going to try to like add it as a browser protocol. So I assume that's one of the preconditions, but I'm not sure if there's others that you would also need to do, or whether you've given any thought to using it in use cases beyond just distribution, but into end user delivery as well.
Yeah, we do have on these thoughts. No clear roadmap so far, but of course we would like to address this use case.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I'm Mark from High Vision. Can I also answer this, or do I need to get in the queue?
Sorry, who is this?
Mark Tsimankowski, High Vision. I'm working with Maxime, and I would like to.
Yeah, go ahead if you want to help answer.
Thank you. So I would view it way similar to RTMP of how it scales, right? So it's optimal. Why it was created is the contribution problem. How do you get it into the cloud from an on-prem location over the public internet, and how do you get it across? But it works as a protocol similar to an RTMP. So if you have a server and you contribute a stream into it, then obviously you can have hundreds or thousands of clients accessing that, depending on your server capacity. However, it's not since it's UDP based, it's not directly in the browser, right? So it's that's a limitation here. So when we're saying contribution and distribution, what that typically means is there's usually either a native software somewhere or a client that's receiving the stream, and not directly the browser window.
Okay, thanks. Somebody's typing a bunch.
Yes. Yeah, if you're not speaking, could you please mute so we don't get background noise? All right. I guess since Spencer took himself out until the dispatch discussion, I guess I'm up next. So so taking off my chair hat for a moment, one of the things that I think would help people at the IETF understand the context for this work is knowing a bit about why you decided to develop a new protocol rather than take an existing protocol, or take an existing protocol as is, or extend one to have some of the properties that you wanted. What were the protocols that you looked at before developing this, and why didn't they measure up? I think that's basically what I'm asking for.
Okay, this is Mark again. I would answer that because that's a stupid idea. So back then in 2012, when I joined Haivision at that point, I was asked for a solution to transmit low latency live streams over the public internet instead of over protected networks, what we were doing and being one of the leaders at that time, as well as we are today. But so they came to me, and I had very little experience, to be honest, with networking. So I'm a pragmatic guy. I came from computer vision and whatever. So I took, I looked on the internet what I found, and I found a protocol for very high throughput, for very high data transfer over the public internet, which was UDT, the library, but it was designed for file transfer, but it behaved very well on the network, and I was able to utilize links at a maximum capacity, but it was not designed to have a real-time behavior, was end-to-end defined latency and encryption. So I worked with the networking people in the company who helped me to add that functionality. Like 10 years later or 8 years later, with all the knowledge I learned and with all the networking that I do every day now, I would probably have started back then with RTP, but that's just not the way it happened. That's basically why.
Okay, I mean, I think that makes sense. It just helpful for me for historical context. I mean, that seems reasonable. All right, so next up in the queue is Glenn.
Hey there. Hey, so first, thank you for bringing this into the IETF via these presentations. I know it takes a lot of work, and the IETF can be a little bit scary. So thank you for doing both. And I'll let just a comment. So I'm from Comcast, NBC Universal, and we use this stuff in our operations all the time. And so this is our reality of our media ops. Using SRT to haul our stuff around in our normal day-to-day work. So I'd like to see this succeed, and in particular, I'm encouraged by the hope that the lessons that have been learned in other parts of the IETF around how to do connection IDs very efficiently and securely, and also how to fold security into the protocols like this can be maybe applied and adopted by SRT to make it even better than it is today. So one question I do have, though, is, so where do you sort of see the priorities for SRT? I mean, reliability of obviously delivery of packets is number one, especially for live media. You can't miss the soccer score goal or the hockey puck going into the net. That would be very, very bad. And so that's a non-starter. What's sort of the next set of priorities for you? Is it adding security features into it? Is it encryption capabilities? Where do you sort of see that going?
The current priority is integrated what we call connection bonding functionality to add redundancy, seamless switching as part of the protocol, as well as main backup failover functionality and balancing data over multiple links. What you would need for, say, like a multiple bonded or multiple 4G adapters or something to balance the data over links. That for us is something that has to be part of a contribution protocol, and that's the top priority. The other priorities are looking at the security model, and in addition to the pre-shared key, can we, for example, somehow adopt a DTLS model as a protocol or TLS model? And that's where we need, that's where we can need all the support we can get and all the help we can get. We are very interested in, because we know, especially in this community and in the wider community, that is a question that comes up obviously again and again and again. So I believe that those two are the key, and at the same time we are putting a lot of research efforts into optimizing the congestion control algorithms to make it friendly to the network and optimal in its behavior. That's been started probably like a year ago, and then we're coming to the point where we have good test environments and a good community, which is very important. So we can invoke the community to help us evaluate those things and get feedback on it.
Okay, I especially like the congestion control because one of the ongoing problems anybody has in pulling video out of things like live sporting events is the availability of very reliable high-speed networks and things that play well with the existing network are very welcome because they make everybody's lives easier. But thank you. Bye.
In queue, and I'm also a little bit of moderating here. We are, as Kyle observed, running low on time. So at 1:15, we are going to move to our next large presentation, and I will apologize in advance. I skipped over Glenn's update from SMPTE, but that's because I had heard previously that he hadn't extracted an update, so we'll be doing that at our next meeting. That agenda item is dropped. I would like to make sure that we have at most 3 more minutes discussion on this topic. I would sum up where we are at this point as there is interest in this protocol. There is, in this group, particularly interest around what it means for and what it can do for and how it does for video. This is not the group that would work on the technical specification, but maybe what we can do is take most of the rest of the discussion to the mailing list if the SRT proponents are willing to engage on the mailing list. That was a question directed at you folk.
Totally fine.
Okay, so the last one in the queue, it looks like, is Spencer.
Yeah, and without wandering through dispatch very much, it seemed like the way that discussion ended up was that you were going to be doing a draft describing what SRT is now. That's something that doesn't exist in a complete form quite yet. If I understood that correctly, that would help MOPS discuss SRT more effectively. So that sounds like a wonderful thing to have happen no matter what else happens with SRT and the IETF.
All right, and that concludes the queue for this talk. Thank you, guys. And I guess back to Leslie.
Let me see if I can get my to behave this time. So Jake, you are up.
All right. Thanks again, Leslie. So this presentation, the scope is in terms of engagement between using MOPS as a venue for engagement between the operators and looking for it ends with a call for participation. So I'll keep that in mind, but I'll walk through a little bit of what I'm doing and where it's going. Next slide, please. So it kind of starts back in 2014. We had some plans, and they basically looked like this. Going to get some multicast video to play, get the ISPs to deliver multicast, and profit, right? Next slide. So the real motivation here is that we could see the looming scalability issues that we've seen unfolding over the last several years, and they're continuing to unfold. And the goal here is to capture as a way to solve this problem. Multicast looked to us then and still looks to us now like it's got a lot of potential there. So next slide, please. So, as time went forward, we fleshed that out a little bit, and a couple pieces of this worked out great. We got the multicast video to play; it's working fine. We shipped a product. It's a walled garden video product, and we first deployed it in 2019 Q1. Customers are happy; they're expanding the deployment, but unfortunately, it doesn't solve the scalability issues without getting to that interdomain multicast piece, which is still an ongoing work in progress. But we're getting closer on that. So next slide, please. The attitudes that we've encountered for how to make this work, I think are probably no surprise to anyone, but just to kind of summarize them, the value proposition for multicast is clear. It's all about the scalability. Primarily for things that can have that are accessed concurrently, and the viability of it is also clear, in that it's deployed and running and works great where it is deployed and running. It's commonly used for set-top box TV services, and that's about it, because really. Because of the interop problem, which is that STB services and lab are basically the only two places that own, all of the sender, the network, and the receiver in one entity. And the cons here are, we think, the main reason that this hasn't taken off yet. And the overriding one is that it's hard to make that business case when you don't know the costs and you don't know how much you're going to be able to save. And part of the reason that you don't know the costs and how much you're going to be able to save is because of the trickiness in the interop. And part of the risks are, this has been tried before, and it was kind of an expensive failure to get MBOND running last time. I mean, it's not exactly a failure, like it did some things, but it has not really realized its potential at this stage. And part of the reason is about this interop. What we're trying to do is kind of address this. The next slide, please. So to summarize the discussion has been, our vision here is that, well, AMT is a useful way to get this rolled out. And so we started looking into that, and that was in the 2015 timeframe. And we're trying to make that become viable. Some of our early discussions with operators indicated that it's just not going to be possible to do it with, so it's no different from peering if you have to set up static IPs and a mapping with the static IPs. So this resulted in what's coming up. It's in off 48 now. After this meeting, I'll probably go look at my latest round of responses if I've got them. But a way to discover it that can be sort of individually deployed by an AMT relay operator and can be discovered by anybody with access to DNS is now at a proposed status standard or proposed standard status level, nearly captured as an RFC. And among the problems, so one of my first contributions at the IETF on this was trying to get a handle on the way you can do rate limits, because multicast doesn't build in any way to do that, and we're very concerned about the capacity of or how to make it a manageable problem to ingest an unknown amount of capacity, or what would otherwise be an unknown amount of capacity, into someone's network and make it safe. So this is one of the issues we're trying to address. This is an ongoing conversation, not just we're not done yet, but this is kind of where things stand now and what it's looked like so far in a summary form. Next slide, please. So our attempts to address the attitudes is to sort of, make the costs specific. Like, okay, here's some things. If you do these things, then we will have a viable architecture and it will actually work. And our efforts to address the unknown savings that you would get is to quantify, like, what are we going to actually be able to accomplish? And our estimates are coming up with for Akamai traffic in terms of if we look at what all is addressable, what can we actually do if we have ubiquitous multicast deployment? And we look at things that are kind of accessed concurrently. We think that we can ultimately get to 20% of our day-to-day traffic and 50% of our peak traffic. But furthermore, and maybe more importantly for potential ISP partners, is that we want our architecture to be repeatable by other operators, so that when you get this all set up and make this work, then it's not just our traffic that you're going to be saving, but anybody who is able to sort of realize and take and make use of the same kind of usage. And then as far as interop, then I mean, we've got our sender. We are going to be spinning up a few different senders. Unfortunately, there's not like a really wide body of deployed functional receivers that are able to receive like a standardized set of protocols, at least not yet. So what we're doing is, for today's version, we have a functioning Android SDK that can be deployed in an app that can run on a set-top box or mobile phones, and we can integrate that. And the project that's underway now is to get a multicast API into a browser and to start trying to upstream that API. But in the meantime, to run our SDK as a web application within those browser web pages, so that anyone with a browser is going to be able to start making use of these features if they're there. And as we move that forward, then our intent is to get that upstreamed into browsers, get it standardized by W3C and turned into an API that can be actually used, and eventually to turn this into a standardized set of transport protocols that are widely available at receivers. But we have to sort of get this staged thing going in order to get anywhere. So this is where we are now. Partners for proof of concept starting this year. So next slide, please. So our future plans at this point are that we want to, on the transport part, we want to expand our usage of multicast to be able to take care to make use of basically anything popular. That's what these three use cases have in mind. Linear video is the one that we have running today, but we think that it's addressable to access popular on-demand video. If you look at some of the major on-demand video releases, even though they're released on demand, it's very common that people are watching it within kind of the same half-hour slot. And so when you have 1 million users watching something in the same half-hour slot, it turns out that many of them are accessing things at essentially the same time. And so all you have to do is deliver a little bit of unicast, and then as long as they can buffer a little bit of multicast, then there's no reason they can't be just accessing like 2 minutes worth of unicast instead of 60 minutes worth of unicast to watch that whole thing, or even just 2 minutes at a time. And the savings really add up when you try and address it that way. And additionally, the software download kind of use case. Games. Some of these games have 80 million active users that need, and sometimes they need an update before they can log on again. And that update sometimes is like 20, 40 gigabytes. And when you add that up, those are the same bits going out to a lot of people. And if you can deliver those with network replication, then you can really, really save a lot of money. And so, our story here is that this is a win-win. This is if we can achieve 50% peak offload, and we think that other people in many cases can achieve a similar kind of offload, then we think that there's a good win-win story here that can reduce the infrastructure costs that ISPs are going to be faced with over time, and that by engaging now and getting this to move forward, that we can really get to a place that's useful. And meanwhile, we're also trying to get those receivers deployed, and we're trying to just make this an addressable problem. So yeah, next slide, please. So for this year, what we're trying to do is get that browser API going. We have a dev team that's begun work on it. We're doing a few internal demos still to try and make sure that we actually can solve our use case, but I'm fairly confident that's going to succeed. So that is going to be like play video with our proposed API and make sure that our WebAssembly SDK is going to do the job that we need it to do. And as soon as we do that, our plans are to start trying to upstream that, to declare an intent to implement, or an intent to prototype, I guess it is now, and to start folding in the work that we're doing in MBOND to make this something that's reasonable to put into a browser. Because one of the things that becomes immediately clear when you talk to browser developers is that they're highly aware of how malicious the web is. It's at a scale, not meant for mortals to understand really. But the two things that we're trying to prevent so far, we're not sure if it's going to be enough, but we think that it's a good start, and we think that they are a minimum set of what's necessary. And we don't have other good ideas that cannot be addressed by this yet. So we think this might be enough to get going and to kind of see operationally what we run into. And so that is our intent. And the other intent for this year is to begin, to the extent possible, some trials with carriers and make sure that the AMT ingest architecture that we're proposing is going to work for them to be usable and get the job done for getting multicast traffic transported the places that it needs to get to, and then to try to scale to some real content that gets delivered. We're also partnering with some content owners. They're not the ones that have to do as much work, so it's not as hard a sell for them. And we would very much like to make sure that our proposed mechanism for bandwidth controls will work with some actual deployed systems that are used for bandwidth controllers. So we're interested in tackling that problem. Next slide, please. So our call for participation is, we're in talks with a number of folks, but in some cases it's not like the people in our company that work with the CDN side of the carriers are necessarily all the right people to be talking to. So if you know somebody in a carrier that you think would be interested in this, then an introduction would be wonderful. Or if you work at a carrier that might be interested in exploring this and capitalizing on those cost savings, then please do reach out to us. We would love to have a meeting to give you an architecture walkthrough and decide after that, after you have time to look it over and get any questions you have answered, whether this looks like something that you'd be interested in leaning into and figuring out. And we can make our overall estimates more specific to like the observed traffic that we've been sending into your network to figure out, like, is this something that really makes sense for what we typically deliver into your network, or is this something that just because of the way things aren't going to be that useful. Yeah, so that is what we're asking for, and please reach out if you have anything that you'd like to get more details on. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, we are almost at the end of the allotted time, but if there are any questions for Jake, please queue up. We'll go over a little bit if we have to.
Question, but I'll throw out just very much. It was interesting overview, current realities and things that you're trying to tackle them with.
All right. Thanks, Leslie.
All right, anyone?
General question, would we like to hear more about the progress from this? And Jake, would you like to send your invite to the mailing list as well to get broader reach?
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. Thank you.
hearing any further questions, two items of AOB. One I had mentioned in the agenda, the liaison state we have from SE29 Working Group 11 to the IETF MOPS Working Group. I don't know if we have anyone on the call that can speak to that liaison.
This is Spencer Dawkins. I talked to Stefan, and he had no further update as of Monday.
We'll take that to the mailing list. Thank you very much. And then the other AOB, Kyle alluded to earlier, and as did Jake, I guess Jake alluded to the Git repo that has been set up under the auspices of the IETF MOPS working group. And Kyle is on the hook to share details of that with the working group mailing list.
Yeah. So we now have as Leslie mentioned, we have a set of repositories, an area, whatever you want to call it, an organization on GitHub for the MOPS working group. So when we adopt documents that are going to be managed through revision control, then we'll move them into that repo. I mean, just to be clear, that's not a requirement for adopting documents. We're not prescribing that everyone must use, that every document author must use GitHub, but I encourage you to check it out if you haven't, because it's a very good way for teams to collaborate on documents. I'll send out the URL on the mailing list shortly.
And that brings up the question, Eric, I'm not sure what, if anything, we have to do to coordinate with you for blessing or otherwise connecting the Git repo.
I don't think so. That's mainly the working group chairs doing the work.
And I think that we need to get a pointer to it on the charter page, but we can coordinate with you about that offline, or you can just edit that. I don't know. Yeah.
Do it offline. Easier.
Cool. That was all I had for other business. Does anybody else have any other business? Hearing any, I'll take the opportunity to thank everybody for coming out to the meeting, and certainly thanks to our presenters for sharing their work and taking on questions. I expect that there will be more of these, because I'm personally fairly convinced the IETF won't be meeting face to face anytime soon. So if you have any feedback on things that worked well in this meeting, things that could have worked better, or other areas you'd like us to tackle in future virtual events, do please share with the MOPS chairs at IETF.org, Kyle and I. I would take any and all feedback, especially constructive feedback. Anything else, Kyle?
No, I think we're all set. Just make sure that you all sign the blue sheets, the virtual blue sheets in the Etherpad.
I also wanted to say that you all are getting nice comments in the WebEx chat, which are going to go away when the conference ends. So I wanted to let the chairs appreciate that while it lasts.
Well, we appreciate that.
Great.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.